HOA sent cops after black woman, not knowing she's the county sheriff. It started with a simple complaint. A black woman had parked her SUV in front of her own house. At least that's what the neighbors said. Within minutes, the homeowners' association picked up the phone, dialing law enforcement like it was routine. But what they didn't know was that the woman inside that house wasn't just another target of neighborhood policing. She was the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county, and when the HOA weaponized the police against her, the entire community was about to witness a lesson they would never forget. This isn't just a story about prejudice. It's about power, hypocrisy, and justice. The neighborhood was the kind of place people imagined when they dreamed of peaceful suburbia, manicured lawns, cookie-cutter homes, and a strict HOA that promised to keep things in order. For most, that meant rules about trash bins, lawn heights, and fence colors. But for some residents, it meant something far darker, using the HOA to enforce unwritten rules about who belonged. Sheriff Dana Williams had moved in only a few months earlier. She was respected countywide, known for her firm but fair leadership, her commitment to reform, and her ability to connect with people across racial lines. But here, behind the white picket fences, none of that mattered. To many of her new neighbors, she wasn't the sheriff. She was just another black woman who, in their eyes, didn't quite fit. It started with the stares. Then came the whispered complaints. Some residents began reporting harmless violations. Her grass was too long, her recycling bin wasn't tucked away fast enough, her visiting family members parked along the curb. Each note from the HOA dripped with passive aggression, cloaked in policies, but rooted in something else entirely. Dana ignored it at first, focusing on her demanding job. But one evening, when she parked her county-issued SUV in her driveway after a 14-hour shift, things escalated. Within half an hour, HOA board members had called law enforcement, insisting there was a suspicious vehicle and an unknown woman lingering outside the house. They didn't realize the woman was their sheriff. They didn't realize the SUV was government-issued. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose more than just a misunderstanding. It would reveal the way power and prejudice collide in everyday life. The call came into the county dispatch like countless others. Suspicious activity in the Oakwood subdivision. Officers responded immediately, not realizing the address. Belonged to their boss. As Dana unloaded groceries from her trunk, she noticed 2 patrol cars creeping down her street. Their headlights swept over her driveway, slowing as they approached. At first, she didn't think much of it. Officers often patrolled neighborhoods, and she respected the practice. But when both cars stopped directly in front of her home, the unease hit. 2 officers stepped out, hands near their holsters. Their voices carried a sharpness that made it clear this wasn't a friendly check-in. They called out, demanding to know what she was doing there, who the car belonged to, and whether she lived in the house at all. Dana, still in plain clothes, kept calm. Years of law enforcement experience had taught her how quickly encounters like this could spiral. She gave them her name, her address, and calmly explained that she was bringing in groceries after work. But they pressed further, asking for ID, suggesting the SUV might be stolen, and claiming they had received multiple complaints from the HOA about an unknown individual loitering around the property. In that moment, Dana realized something. The officers hadn't recognized her. Despite being the sheriff, despite leading their department, despite her face appearing on county press conferences and news broadcasts, they didn't see her authority. They only saw her skin. As the exchange grew tense, curious neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Some even stepped onto porches, watching as the scene unfolded. For them, it was confirmation of what they already believed, that Dana was out of place. For Dana, it was a painful reminder that no badge, no title, no years of service could shield her from the suspicion cast on her simply for being black. She handed over her credentials, her sheriff's badge gleaming under the porch light. The officers froze, stunned into silence. Their faces shifted from authority to embarrassment as realization sank in. They had just questioned their own boss, called to the scene by residents who had assumed criminality where none existed. But Dana wasn't done, because this wasn't just about her. It was about every black resident in that neighborhood who might never get the chance to flash a badge to prove their belonging. And she knew the HOA had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. The next morning, Dana called a special meeting with the HOA board. Word of the incident had already spread, neighbors whispering about the spectacle, officers shaken by their mistake, and residents divided between quiet shame and stubborn denial. The HOA members entered the community hall with stiff posture, ready to justify themselves with talk of rules, neighborhood safety, and concerns. But Dana had spent her career dissecting excuses, and she wasn't about to let this slide. She stood before them not just as a homeowner, but as the sheriff, with the full weight of her office behind her. Calmly, she laid out the facts. A false report had been made, police resources had been wasted, and she had been subjected to racial profiling in her own driveway. She reminded them that filing false complaints carried legal consequences. The room grew heavy with silence. Some board members shifted uncomfortably, while others stared defiantly, unwilling to admit wrongdoing. But there was no escaping the reality. What they had done wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate act rooted in prejudice. Dana didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Authority radiated from her presence. She reminded them that she had the power to pursue charges, to expose their actions publicly, and to hold every single one of them accountable. And then she gave them a choice: change the way this HOA operated, or face the legal and public consequences of their behavior. By the time she finished, the veneer of control the HOA once held had cracked. They weren't the ones in power anymore. Dana was. In the weeks that followed, the Oakwood subdivision changed. The HOA, once so quick to police its residents, now found itself under scrutiny. Dana ordered diversity training, stricter oversight, and a formal review of every complaint lodged within the last 5 years. Patterns of racial bias emerged. Black families and other minorities had been disproportionately targeted for petty violations, while white residents faced little consequence for similar or worse infractions. Some neighbors quietly apologized, ashamed of their silence. Others resisted, clinging to the belief that they had done nothing wrong. But the power dynamic had shifted. The HOA no longer operated unchecked, and Dana's presence became a reminder that accountability had finally arrived. For Dana, the incident cut deeper than just personal insult. It was proof of how easily systems of authority, whether law enforcement or HOAs, could be twisted into tools of exclusion. If even she, the county sheriff, could be treated as a suspect in her own driveway, what chance did others have? But the confrontation also carried hope. Because once the truth came to light, it couldn't be ignored. The neighborhood could no longer pretend that racism didn't exist within its manicured streets. The masks had slipped, and the conversations that followed, however uncomfortable, were necessary. Standing on her porch weeks later, Dana looked at the same houses, the same streets, the same manicured lawns. But something was different now. Her neighbors didn't just see a black woman anymore. They saw the sheriff. They saw authority. They saw someone who refused to be silenced. And as she locked eyes with the very HOA board members who once doubted her, Dana asked herself, and the world around her, the only question that mattered. If it takes a badge and a title to be treated with dignity, what does that say about the society we live in?